Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Hey, Miles, good morning to you. How does it look where you are?
Well, Soledad, we're on the better side, the more favorable side of the storm, the left side of the eye wall, and as a result, we're not seeing a huge impact just yet. However, if you go down to the lower right quadrant, if you will, of what's going on, down toward Biloxi and that part of the world right now, they're getting some rather significant activity as some of these so-called feeder bands, which are essentially just layers of heavy precipitation, a lot of wind, start coming ashore. CNN's Rob Marciano is there, as a matter of fact, in Biloxi. He's kind of riding out that portion of the storm, and we're going to check in with him in just a few moments. But first, let's check in with Chad Myers, who's been watching the storm, offering all kinds of tips for people as well as they ride this thing out. There's still plenty of power around here in Baton Rouge, Chad. I suspect people in the New Orleans area are losing power as we speak, and so your advice is well taken. As a matter of fact, I saw a report just a few moments ago that power went out at the Superdome, where 30,000 people are holed up. Of course, they have emergency generators, but no air conditioning as a result. So that's going to be obviously an interesting situation as the morning progresses.
Mm-hmm. Okay, can you imagine sitting there in a fairly dark area? I mean, I know they have the emergency lighting, but you've seen that emergency lighting before. It's certainly not going to be like the lights are on in the Superdome, and obviously still dark there. Now you're hearing the howling winds outside, one of the very heaviest bands so far for New Orleans. You can see this red zone here moving right through the city of New Orleans. Now everybody wants to call landfall on the eye. I want you to be just a little bit patient here because the Hurricane Center says at least another 20 minutes before we call where the eye made landfall. They want to know where it is. It's very close to Burris. It's very close to Port Sulphur, and south of there even toward Empire. That's where the heaviest rain is right now. But where Rob Marciano is, up in Biloxi, up here, just got slammed with one of those outer bands, and he's still 95 miles away. If you saw that wind gust that he just went through, that's going to be the lightest one that he sees for the next 6 hours as the storm gets closer and closer and closer, expecting landfall. The heaviest part of the damage from Mobile Bay, flooded Mobile Bay. You need to stay out of all the low areas in Mobile, all the way back even over toward Bay St. Louis. That's the area there from Slidell eastward. That's where the heaviest damage is going to be today. And although you're not quite in it yet, every time, Miles, you get one of these feeder bands to come through Baton Rouge, and there will be many as the storm gets closer, your winds are going to pick up too. Back to you.
Hey, and can you give me a general sense, what direction will the wind be going at that time, Chad?
They should be from the northeast, Miles, from this direction here.
Coming down.
Because the winds come up this way, over this way, and then down this way. That's why there's no storm surge to the west of an eye. Because, in fact, the wind is actually blowing offshore. It blows the waves and all the water away from shore. Here, it blows all the water waves onshore, and all that water just keeps piling up and piling up and piling up. We have not seen a significant storm surge storm since really Camille, where Camille brought in a 20-foot bubble of water. A lot of people say wall of water. This is not like the Hawaii 5-0 wave that comes onshore that these guys are surfing on. This is a bubble of water that rises slowly, probably a foot a minute. Now that seems quick, and it is, but a foot a minute, not just some 10 feet or 20-foot wall of water that comes in 10 seconds. So you have to be careful. All of a sudden you're good in one spot, and 15 minutes later, the water's over your head. Back to you.
All right, Chad Myers, that's worth remembering, especially for those people who are to the eastern portion of that eye as it wobbles ashore now. And, of course, calling landfall in this part of the world is difficult, as Chad points out. It is marshy land, and so it'll be difficult to determine exactly when the storm reaches terra firma, so to speak. CNN's Rob Marciano is in Biloxi. He's been enduring some of those early feeder bands. Rob, what are you seeing and feeling there now?
Well, we don't see nearly as much now because the lights went out in this block. There are still some street lights along the access road to Interstate 10 that are still on. But as Chad mentioned, we went through a pretty good squall just about 10 minutes ago with puffs easily over 50 miles an hour. And typically that's the break point. 55 to 60 miles an hour in the weather business is when we start to say that's when tree limbs start to come down and they'll start to take out some power lines. So power outages are going to be an issue ongoing here really the next couple of hours, I would suspect we'll start to see them become more widespread across southern Mississippi. You and Chad spoke about the storm surge. That is what we are most concerned about last night. There's a puff. Most concerned about last night when we were on the beach. All right, that's over 30 right there again. So, it's kind of important to point out that when we go into these storms, it often feels a lot worse than it is. And folks who aren't trained spotters will call in reports to local TV stations, even to CNN and radio stations to report their winds, and it often feels a lot worse than it is. At least that's been my experience. It'll feel like it's 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, and you get out the wind gauge, and it's nearly half that. So it really goes to illustrate the power of Mother Nature. And one thing that we noticed when the first landfall happened a couple of nights ago in Hollywood, Florida, when we were there for that, it was only a Category 1 storm, but we were just getting pounded right along the water. So they call them hurricanes for a reason. You just don't want to be messing around, even if it's a Cat 1. This one, a Cat 4 right now. We are in the right-hand quadrant, so that's nasty. This weather is going to continue for several hours to come, probably 6 to 10 hours. Chad mentioned, I think, that the eye of the storm probably about 90 miles from us. It's moving to the north now at about 15, so that puts secondary landfall, if you will, at least parallel to us in about 5 or 6 hours. So if we're getting puffs to 60 miles an hour now, I'm not excited too much to see what it looks like 5, 6 hours from now, Miles.
Well, let's give viewers a sense, Rob, of how you're prepared, because you're obviously potentially in harm's way there. What is your escape plan? What is your plan for staying safe there?
Well, we're actually trying to figure out a place, number one, to be safe, and then number two, to still bring the pictures, because we're not here to play around in the wind and then take cover and not at least make an effort to show what's going on. So we're trying to figure out a spot where we can at least stick a camera and point it outside and show what's going on and somehow get a signal out for that. But as the storm approaches, these winds are going to start. Right now they're going from east to west. They'll eventually start going more southeasterly, and if the track is what we think it is right now, which would bring the center of this just to the west of Gulfport, we will eventually get south winds, and those are going to be the most damaging. That's when you kind of get the forward speed of the storm, coupled with the counterclockwise rotation, and it's literally like a fighter giving you a punch on the right side of your chin. So that's what we're most concerned about, those south winds, which will probably happen 11 o'clock, maybe around noontime, so 4, 5, 6 hours from now. And at that point, we're likely going to have to either just go inside and ride it out or head to the other side of a building. I mean, we're near our hotel right now. We're trying to protect the camera equipment as far as rain goes, so they are under an awning. I am standing just back from an awning, which I should also point out is not like a gas station awning. I don't think this sucker is going to fly away just yet. But, Miles, to answer your question, we're going to have to rotate our position with the storm. We're just going to have to take stock of the situation as time progresses and make a judgment call as to when we should go inside. And we're not going to mess around with that. I mean, when it's time to go inside, it's time to go inside. And, Mother Nature may have other plans for us, too. It's not easy to get a signal out to our satellite, as you know, in this type of situation. Our satellite truck right now is protected on this side of the building. It is on the west side of the building, so right now protected from the wind. But as those winds begin to turn to the south, our signal may be knocked out and we may have nothing to do. So we'll go inside and maybe shoot some video for you on tape and feed it out at a later point. So it'll be a situation, as you know, that changes minute by minute. We'll just have to play it by ear.
All right, Rob Marciano, I think if nothing else, you get a sense of how much thought goes into this, as a lot of folks tell us repeatedly as we do this coverage, why do you put yourselves in harm's way? The idea, first of all, is to tell the story, and the other idea, of course, more important than that, really, is to stay safe. Let's go now to CNN's Gary Tuchman. He is making his way through the storm, staying safe, we might add, in Hurricane 1. He began in Gulfport, Mississippi, heading pretty much west, southwest, along the coast. Gary, where are you? What are you seeing?
That's right, Miles. And now we can hear you perfectly well. We are in Hurricane 1, our vehicle, which allows us to transmit live pictures while we're driving around. It's just starting to get light outside. The conditions have deteriorated very quickly here, and we're already seeing lots of damage. Very hard to see right now, but we're going to give you a shot out the front window where our headlights are. Our driver and producer, Tristan, in charge of the wheel here. And this gives you a look at what's going on. We're already seeing white caps on some of these beachfront roads. We have had to turn around because the water was so deep already, the flooding so immense at this point that it was too unsafe to keep driving. So we actually looked like it was a place where you could do some surfing. That's how bad it is right now. All the power in the Gulfport area went out about 45 minutes ago. This is the area, as Rob Marciano was just telling you, where it looks like that eastern eye wall will hit. There's a feeling right now of resignation here in Gulfport. They experienced Hurricane Camille in 1969. Category 5 hurricane killed 250 people, 130 just in this area of Harrison County, Mississippi. So a lot of the people who are over 40 years old remember that very well. They say this is very reminiscent of that. Of course, this storm, although it's not quite as powerful, is much bigger, so they don't know what to expect. But we can tell you now at 6:10 Central Time, the conditions already are very bad. And people here are very concerned of what could happen. We just passed a car, I don't know if you could see it, but a car that was abandoned on the road where the water is very deep. But we just want to tell you, Miles, and reassure our viewers, we'll stay in this car and drive around as long as it's safe. Right now we still consider it safe enough to do so, but the conditions in this city of 71,000, very poor. All 10 beachfront casinos closed. This area, mandatory evacuation, and people really listened and did evacuate the area. Miles?
CNN's Gary Tuckman in Hurricane 1 making his way in our direction. He'll be checking in all throughout the way, giving us really unusual viewpoint on a storm, the capability of sort of going to the locations where the problems are, being there in real time and sharing that with us. Back to you, Soledad.
All right, Miles, thanks. Let's take you right to New Orleans and the Superdome. It is the largest shelter right now. Some 8,000 to 9,000 people are reported to be inside the Superdome. These pictures were taken not too long ago. Obviously, it's normally the home of the Saints. What they've done is bring thousands and thousands of people in with whatever belongings they can carry. They told people not to bring too much stuff, and they're keeping them in the seats. Not many people are out on the field. Lines and lines as the thousands of people each had to be checked in. It is now the biggest shelter in the city of New Orleans. 80%, we're told, of New Orleans residents, 480,000 residents, heeded the mandatory evacuation order. The power failed at the Superdome at 5:02 a.m. Eastern Time, and there is backup power now being run by generators, but of course the lighting is reduced because of that, and with the backup power, the generator power, there is no possibility of air conditioning. It cannot run the air conditioning, so conditions inside, as you can imagine, probably not all that comfortable for the 8,000 to 9,000 people who are estimated to be inside. The Red Cross is preparing for the very worst. They've been stockpiling supplies ready to head into New Orleans, into the area, to get the first chance they get. We want to talk to Tricia Box. She's a spokeswoman for the Red Cross, and she joins us by phone. She's in Mount Hermon, Louisiana, which is just about 100 miles north of New Orleans, near the Mississippi state line. Tricia, good morning. Thanks for talking to us.
Good morning, Soledad.
You're at a shelter, aren't you? Give me a sense of what kind of circumstances and situation you're in right now.
We are at the Mount Hermon Elementary and High Schools, and we have about 500 people, and that's our capacity. And we've been filled to capacity since early evening yesterday, and we have about 20 to 30 volunteers and staff from Red Cross, and we're sheltered across the street at a church. And we've been hunkered down since late last night, and we've just been waiting for the bands. And actually, they've really started hitting, I guess, about 2 hours ago. And so the wind's just been constant since about 5 o'clock.
What does it feel like? What does it sound like, Tricia?
It just sounds like, constant just wind. It's not really howling yet, but we can hear the rain. And the rain is, really hard, but it's off and on. And, the gusts will pick up, and our lights are kind of flickering. So we're prepared. We're the Red Cross, so we're ready to. We have flashlights, and we're going to take care of our evacuees.
515 people inside that shelter. Did you have to turn people away if you're at capacity? Were there people who you had to say, "I'm sorry, you have to go somewhere else"?
Of course, yes. We did have to open alternate shelter areas, just because there was just busloads of people, and the majority of our evacuees are from Jefferson Parish. and it's the majority are either the emergency workers and their families. We have some firefighters here, and it's just a large amount of people that are out in this kind of weather doing their job, but their families are here and they're safe.
We're looking, Tricia, at pictures inside the Superdome where they have many multiples of the number of folks that you have, some 9,000 people. And there are many concerns, of course, about feeding folks inside a shelter of that size and just getting water to people because, of course, that's not really the priority. I guess the priority is to keep everybody alive and safe until this storm passes.
Exactly. I mean, and that's what we do. We take care of them from the very beginning, and we, throughout the storm, we're just going to be here for them. And, a lot of them did bring their own bedding and, their own food. But, if they don't have something, we're going to help, find something for them to be safe and be comfortable while they ride out this storm.
Tricia Box, good luck to you. We'll continue to check in, and of course, to the 515 people who are in your charge this morning as well. Thanks, Tricia. Richard Knapp is tracking the storm. He's from the National Hurricane Center in Miami. Richard, thanks for being with us once again. How much closer is Katrina now to making what I guess you consider to be official landfall?
Well, we believe the center of the hurricane has actually made landfall in between Grand Isle, Louisiana, and the mouth of the Mississippi River. During the next several hours, it's going to be passing along a very irregular coastline, partially over water, partially over land, and it's about 70 miles southeast of New Orleans. So by late this morning, midday, the hurricane, the eye, should be passing near or over New Orleans, and then into the afternoon be very near the border between Mississippi and Alabama. So during this time, the storm surge could be increasing. The levees protecting the New Orleans area could be overtopped, and we could see storm surge values on the Mississippi coast 20 feet or more.
How fast is the storm moving right now?
Right now it's moving northward at about 15 miles per hour, and we expect that general motion to continue most of today, and then it'll gradually speed up and head off to the northeast on Tuesday.
Chad was talking earlier about the levees, I guess, being overburdened and flooding, but from the top down, because I guess that's the real problem, isn't it?
Correct. What we do is we try to forecast what we think the storm surge would be and then compare that to the size of the levees surrounding the city. And it looks like it's going to be very close with some of these levees, that some of them, the water could rise just to or above the height of the levees, and the water could spill over, and that could cause flooding inside the levee protection system.
Give me a sense of how bad you think this is going to be. The words like catastrophic have been used by numerous people regarding this storm. Is that still safe to say?
It certainly is possible. Whenever you have a Category 4 hurricane making landfall anywhere, you could get extreme to sometimes catastrophic damage. Structures could be completely destroyed in some cases. And on top of that, this hurricane is making landfall in an area that is quite susceptible to storm surge. So certainly, I think people are going to be astounded in some cases by what they see after the storm passes by. And during the next several hours, the weather's only going to get worse in the New Orleans area and the coast of Mississippi and Alabama. Do not let your guard down. This is the time to stay where you are in your place of safe refuge for many more hours.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that certainly bears repeating. We're going to, of course, continue to follow this storm and keep everybody up to date on what's happening. Richard Knapp is tracking Katrina, as we are as well, at the National Hurricane Center. Richard, thanks. We'll check in with you again. Still to come this morning, why would anybody choose to ride out a powerful hurricane like Katrina? We're going to talk to the owners of a bed and breakfast in Biloxi, find out their story. That's just ahead on American Morning. Stay with us. We're back in just a moment.
When the weather is the news, trust CNN. It's essential.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage on a special edition of American Morning. Miles O'Brien live from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where the wind is whipping, the rain is falling. Some of these so-called early feeder bands of Hurricane Katrina, as she comes ashore, depending on who you ask, is that landfall is in the process or happening very soon. Kind of hard to define where the land begins and the Gulf ends. Chad Myers has been talking about this, and this really gets into these sort of, angels dancing on the head of a pin discussions that I guess meteorologists care a lot about. But the fact of the matter is, this is a dangerous storm, whether it's made landfall this moment or it makes landfall in the next 20 minutes.
Just 10 seconds ago, or a minute ago, they did officially call landfall for us, officially live on CNN. So that was really great that they did that for us, because it's always a point of contention when the eye makes landfall. Now, basically, why do we care? Because that's when you know that if you look outside, you can actually see stars or see the sunrise through the eye. You never want to go out during that. As the rain comes through and moves on your way, some live shots from WDSU, that's New Orleans, Louisiana, not seeing a whole heck of a lot there. That's because the power is out. The power officially went out right at the exact moment that Lakefront Airport had a wind gust to 85 miles per hour. Here's the center of circulation, the eye itself, south and southeast of New Orleans, a fairly large eye. That means that as let's say a skater has her arms out and she's skating in the Olympics with her arms out, she's a very big person and she doesn't go very quickly. But when she brings her arms in and continues to do that spin gets much faster. So let me show you something that's going on right now. I just noticed the storm trying to create a new, smaller eye inside the much bigger eye. And when you get a smaller eye, a compact eye makes higher wind speeds. Now the good news is at least those higher wind speeds are east of the eye and east of most of the landmass. Take the landmass, take the rainfall off for you. If you see, it's hard to see sometimes where the land starts and the water ends here, but if I take it off one more time, there's not much out over here. It's kind of swampy land over here. And this is where the heaviest winds are going to be, driving themselves on up toward Biloxi and also into Gulfport. Now you think, oh, the storm's over land. That's great. It's going to start to die off. Well, I just said that's not much land. There's still a lot of water there in that type of swamp there. Not every part of southeastern Louisiana is swamp, but certainly every part of southeast Louisiana right now is wet. And if it's wet, then it's not land, and the hurricane can continue to move on shore and not really continue to strengthen, but certainly not lose any intensity. There's where our Rob Marciano is in Biloxi. More and more rain showers coming right on shore here from Biloxi, right on over to Mobile and into Bay St. Louis. Back to you guys.
All right, Chad Myers, thank you very much. Appreciate that. The city of New Orleans, of course, where most of the people are in this region. That's what caused a lot of the concerns. Was this sort of nightmare scenario, Category 5 storm, which painted a bullseye on the city of New Orleans. Now a Category 4 storm, still a very powerful storm, and now not headed directly for the city. Those are two good pieces of news for a city of 485,000, a metropolitan region of 1.6 million. CNN's Gene Meserve is in the Crescent City this morning as dawn breaks. Gene, what are you seeing?
Well, definitely picking up here. We're getting a lot more wind and rain in the location where we are, and we can see some flooding. When we look down over the edge of the garage where we've taken some shelter, we can see that the streets are beginning to fill up here. This appears to be rain created rather than anything coming in over the levees, which, of course, what they're really worried about here. Also, the power outages continue to spread. There are several high-rise buildings behind me. They've lost power within the last few minutes. Now it looks pretty much as though the entire city is now blacked out around me, except for some emergency lighting in a few locations. It's really quite extraordinary to see what the wind and the water are doing here. It reminds me of a power washer. You know, when you get that incredibly hard flow of water and it just can send water up the side of a building. Well, that's the kind of thing we're seeing here. We went over and took a look at the Superdome with its famous concave sides, and you just saw the water being swept around it by the wind. Really quite dramatic footage. Miles?
Well, Gene, that really paints quite a picture when you think about that. And, of course, the Superdome is a very stout structure, but nonetheless, it was a compromise decision because it is, after all, built below sea level. The parking lot and the field is below sea level. I guess most people are up in the upper decks, which would make it safer for them.
Miles, I'm having a little bit of difficulty making you out, given all the turmoil around me. But yeah, a large part of this city is beneath sea level. It is a real problem, and there have been questions about whether the Superdome.
Gene
really
Meserve in New Orleans, thank you very much. Let's head a little bit to the east, which is incidentally what Katrina seems to be doing, according to Chad Myers in the Weather Center. And Biloxi, Mississippi is where we've been finding Rob Marciano, his weather colleague, Rob, I know you brought a lot of weather gear with you, and you have not really clocked any significant, even tropical storm winds yet. Is that true?
Oh yeah, we've had tropical storm winds gusting over to over 45 miles an hour. So when that happened, we saw power surges, and it's actually quite impressive to me. Now the power is back on in this block. So usually you get winds over 45, 50 miles an hour. That's when power starts to go down. And they're pretty sustained, Miles. I got to tell you, the winds are sustained now at tropical storm force. So, yeah, I mean, they're fluctuating between 25 and 45 miles an hour. So pretty good sustained wind now out of the east. So give you the idea of our position. That's east. I-10 is behind us. That goes east to west, west to east. So the wind is paralleling that out of the east. And typically, I mean, just to kind of been saying this for the past couple of storms, very easy way to determine where the center of any low pressure is in the northern hemisphere is you turn your back to the wind and just point to the left. So that's where the ocean is. I'm kind of pointing towards New Orleans, towards the mouth of the Mississippi River. That's where the center of the storm is, directly to my left as I stand with my back to the wind. What I've noticed in the last hour now is that wind's a little bit, they're starting to turn a little bit more northeasterly, which makes me a little bit more nervous. It means that maybe this thing is taking a bit of more of a jog even farther to the east. But we'll have to see if that northerly component holds up. Sun now starting to come up, so the skies are beginning to brighten, and we'll be able to get a little bit more mobile as the sun comes up, and I can get away from this light and show you some things that are going on around the hotel. That's the latest from here, Miles. It's blowing the rain is coming down sideways and coming down heavy. We're already starting to see significant ponding along the roadways and some of the grassy areas between the interstates. So they've evacuated, or they've closed 2 shelters, which are near the Wolf River in anticipation of that river flooding. So, you know, there's so many things to deal with. Wind, obviously, is going to become an issue, but the storm surge and the actual river flooding is also a concern here in southern South Mississippi, because now it looks like we're going to be in the most dangerous part of the storm, and that doesn't bode well for folks who live down here.
All right, thank you, Rob. I think Chad Myers in the Weather Center has a question for you. Chad?
Yeah, I kind of want to describe to what he's seeing, because clearly he doesn't have a radar there that he can see. But right there, Biloxi, the I-10 just to the north of him. And every time a little rain band comes up, Rob, you're going to get more and more wind. And there are many more rain bands to your south. There's the one you're in now. There's another one here, another one here. And then obviously that rain band here that's to the south of you, another 90 miles. That's not even a rain band at all. That's the eye wall. And we are expecting that eye wall to get very close to Biloxi, or possibly even as far east as Mobile Bay. We'll have to see if the storm takes a left or takes a right. But for the past, I would say 3 to 5 hours, it's been going straight ahead, and it is barreling right to you. So what you're seeing now is actually the easiest stuff that you'll see in the next 6 hours. So be careful out there. Did we lose Rob?
Okay, apparently we lost Rob. For obvious reasons, this is going to be the beginning of many of those as this storm, powerful as it is, comes ashore, and we attempt to tell you the story of it. We run into all kinds of difficulties, as you might imagine, just keeping those satellite dishes locked on, and just little things like water in the microphone can be a big problem. So we will keep you posted, and we'll check back in with Rob. I'm sure everything's fine there, and we'll just get the technicalities worked out. When we return, we're going to check in with our reporters there all along the coast of the Gulf. CNN is your hurricane headquarters. More American Morning in just a moment.
Keep watching CNN, your hurricane headquarters.
Welcome Welcome back, everybody. You're looking at live pictures from Biloxi, Mississippi, where you can see the wind is blowing. That is where Rob Marciano is. We're going to continue to check in with him throughout the morning. This is the location that could take the brunt of the hit today from Hurricane Katrina as she comes on land. Also, they're looking at New Orleans as well, because thousands and thousands of people there are affected. Thousands and 10,000 many New Orleans residents, in fact, have taken shelter in the Louisiana Superdome. Obviously, it's usually home to those 4-hour football games, not evacuations, and evacuations that could last up to a week. Let's get right to Major Ed Bush. He's a spokesman for the Louisiana National Guard. They're helping coordinate at the Superdome. Thank you for being with us, Major. Appreciate your time this morning. Give me a sense of how many people are staying at the Superdome right now and what the conditions are like.
We've got about 10,000 people with us. Spent the night with us last night, and it's a very calm, quiet group. I think for the most part, they're just happy to be out of the storm that they can hear, certainly whistling around the Superdome right now.
Yeah, I bet. Now, 10,000, we all know that the Superdome can seat many more people than that. Did you have to turn away anybody?
No. In fact, there was some questions about a mandatory lockdown. There was nothing of the sort. Anyone who came here looking for a place to seek refuge got in last night. Mm-hmm. And everybody who was here last night got fed. And I think that really helped to calm everybody down. And it's been a very well-behaved, a very satisfied bunch.
Yeah, explain how that's working. We're looking at pictures, I should tell you, from the affiliate WDSU, and I see some people out on the field. I thought they were only going to be in the stands. Is that the case or no?
The pictures, within the pictures you're looking at, probably from the early on stages. What we did yesterday, because it started to rain, we tried to get people inside as fast as we could, and we opened up more checkpoints. And we allowed them to sit on the field temporarily.
Major Bush, I think maybe we lost our connection. That's Major Bush is with the Louisiana National Guard. And the National Guard are helping to coordinate the facilities inside the Superdome. He says some 10,000 people now are seeking refuge. And in fact, they're not turning anybody away. Anybody who shows up at any point will be allowed in. Most of the people are sitting on the seats because, of course, the Superdome can fit many tens of thousands of people, and there are some 10,000 people in there right now. Let's get right back to Major Bush, if he can hear me. Do we have a connection with Major Bush again? Okay, we're going to see if we can get that set up. Adora Udoji is at the Tulane Hospital in New Orleans. She's by phone as well. And as you can imagine, considering the situation, the weather situation, all of these connections can be a little bit tenuous. Adora, good morning to you. What are the situations at the hospitals? Of course, they must be very concerned. You just can't evacuate very sick people.
No, not at all, Soledad. And so far, though, it has been relatively calm here. It was very busy yesterday as they were preparing for the storm. And, in fact, they had to evacuate the first floor, which is their emergency room, because they were concerned, and still are, of course, about flooding. So they moved their emergency room from the first floor up to the third floor. And literally within the last 10 minutes, the power went out all along the block here. It went completely black. They do have an emergency generator that immediately went on, at least in this building. And we were outside for just a few minutes, and it literally sounds like the streets are screaming. It's even beyond howling, and you can hear everything rocking down the street. You can hear garbage cans, street signs have been ripped off, and it just seems to be getting worse, rapidly in the last 10 or 15 minutes. That, in turn, the hospital decided it was time to lock all of the doors and get everyone inside. And now I think we're going to be inside here for the duration. In terms of the patients, they didn't see a great influx of people coming in yesterday evening and even into the night. They did have several dozen folks come over from the Superdome, those who were too frail or sick. We were told some of them needed kidney dialysis. Others were on some sort of oxygen. Their tanks were running out, so they brought them here to the hospital. And for the most part, they're only taking very severe cases. There are dozens of doctors and nurses and hospital administrators who have essentially, Soledad, been living here for like 2 days. They are so exhausted that there were just air mattresses all over the hospital last night, and people were trying to catch catnaps as soon as they could. Essentially, what they're most worried about is the aftermath. aftermath now. I mean, they just don't know how bad the hurricane is going to be and what kind of injuries they're going to see coming out of that. So they're gearing up for that, and they're just hoping that the hospital won't get flooded so that they're going to be able to treat those people as they come through.
Yeah, I would imagine that, they're really only at the very beginning. If they're exhausted now, it is going to be a long couple of days. Dora, let me ask you a question about the ambulances. I mean, where do they park them? If they're concerned that New Orleans or large portions of it are going to flood, what do they do?
Well, there are a combination of places. I mean, the real issue with New Orleans is that so much of particularly downtown is below sea level. So essentially you have some parking garages that are up to 3, 4, 5 feet, far enough above whatever the estimated surge between the surge and the length below sea level. So many of them are parked up higher. Some of them are parked in garages. They actually have a ramp. This is one of the few hospitals in the downtown area that has a ramp that's higher than others, that tends to flood less frequently than others. So they've tried to hedge their bets in a lot of different ways, but at the end of the day, they just don't know what they're going to be dealing with.
Yeah, they sure don't, and I think that's fair to say across the board, isn't it, Adora? None of us knows, and certainly the folks at the National Hurricane Center, all of us keeping our eye on Hurricane Katrina as she comes to land. Not exactly clear what the damage is going to be. A Category 4 storm, which is, as many people have pointed out, a deadly storm. So we're watching Hurricane Katrina for you this morning. Let's get right back to Miles O'Brien. Miles, good morning again.
Soledad, the wind is picking up here. Yet another one of those feeder bands that has been coming through here. I've been just, I was talking to Rob Marciano a little while ago, and he was talking about how the wind always feels a little stronger than it is. I really got a good gust here a moment ago, and it only came out as I held up this tiny little anemometer. Came out at all of 10 miles an hour, and I'm kind of protected by a building here, so that's really not a sense of the kind of wind we've got going here. I'm sure it's getting close to tropical strength out there in the street, and I will, as daylight falls here or arrives, I'm going to take a walk out there and get a little better sense of it. But matter of fact, let's go to Chad Myers. Chad, the wind projections for Baton Rouge at this point, is it still within I know they have all those projections from the Hurricane Center about where the tropical force versus hurricane winds will be. Is Baton Rouge still in the hurricane force zone?
Very, very close. You could probably see wind gusts to 50, 60, and then a couple to around 70. Now, a hurricane, when it says 74 miles per hour for hurricane, that actually means sustained. You can't get a gust to 74 if your sustained is 50. That is not considered to be a hurricane. That's still considered to be a tropical storm. So I suspect you will get tropical storm force sustained winds 50 miles per hour with an occasional gust to 75 or even to 80. Right now, you said you had 10. In fact, you have between 12 and 14 in Baton Rouge. New Orleans up to about 60. We had Lakefront Airport there to a wind gust of 84 in the past hour. Most of this stuff is actually a little bit farther down to the south. The heaviest rain now in southeastern Louisiana, about 60 miles still from Louisiana, from New Orleans, because there's the eye itself moving right over Empire, Burris, and also even into Venice. Back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Chad. Clearly, we are protected here. I'm looking over my shoulder there, and you can really see the rain coming down kind of horizontally across that street light there. You see a few trucks here, a lot of people here on the campus at Louisiana State University. Some students, quite frankly, milling around, just trying to check it out. At this point, being 40 feet above sea level, they're not in a mandatory evacuation zone, so we are seeing some people milling around here. Let's head back to Biloxi, Mississippi, where things are significantly worse right now. Rob Marciano is there. Rob?
Hi, Miles. Our signal going in and out, mostly due to what's called rain fade, and folks who have, satellite service from their home know that when they have a pretty bad thunderstorm or a heavy rain over their house on a Sunday afternoon and their favorite team is playing football and your signal gets cut out and you're frustrated, well, we're going through the same frustration here, but it's part of the deal. The rain coming down sideways and coming down heavily, that satellite just having a hard time shooting through all that water that's falling out of the clouds and stuck up there in the clouds as well. Light coming up now, so we'll be able to get a little bit more mobile here and check things out a little bit more for you. Actually, right now, we're a bit protected from the wind. A couple of corners of the building kind of helping us out, helping our equipment stay somewhat dry. and helping me from, at least right now, not getting blown away. But Miles, I haven't recorded the wind gusts higher than.
All right, Rob, I think we lost Rob there. I'm over here checking the wind out in the middle of the street. Let me walk a little bit closer to you. Things are picking up here definitely as the northerly wind coming down the chute here, that's south in that direction, starting to pick up quite a bit. I haven't gotten a good reading out there yet on what the sustained winds are. Not quite at tropical force yet here in Baton Rouge. And we are watching obviously very closely here. Part of the reason we're here, Soledad, in Baton Rouge is we wanted to be on the edge of it, and the fact of the matter is that being right in the heart of it right now makes it very difficult to tell the story.
Yeah, and that explains why we're dropping out phone lines and also losing some of our signals as well. And I have to imagine it's going to get worse over the next couple of hours as we really start to see Katrina come fully on land, even though she's already made landfall, becoming fully on land, and everyone starts really feeling the brunt of this storm. Miles, we'll check back in with you in just a moment. Towns, as we've mentioned, up and down the Gulf Coast have been evacuated in anticipation of Hurricane Katrina. Some people, though, are staying put. Roger Shanks is riding out the storm in his bed and breakfast guest house in Biloxi, Mississippi. He joins us by phone. He's with his wife, Sandra, as well. Good morning to both of you. I got to ask you, why? Why not get out? Hey, Roger, can you hear me? This is Soledad O'Brien at CNN in New York. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I kind of can hear you, sort of. Hopefully our connection will improve over the next couple of seconds. Listen, I just mentioned that you and Sandra have decided to try to ride out the storm in your bed and breakfast. Why is that? Why didn't you throw your stuff in a car and get out?
Well, we just got so much money involved in this place, antiques and whatever. During Camille, when you couldn't get back in again, so if there was any damage to the house, there was no repair to it for sometimes a week or more, and everything just really got ruined. So we're just going to stay here with it.
I hear you, and I get your explanation, but at the same time, if this storm comes through with the brunt that it is predicted to right now, forget the stuff. You know, you could lose your life.
This house survived the storm of 47. It survived Camille. It didn't even have water in it in Camille. I can look out right now and see the ocean or the Gulf. The water's covering Highway 90, but it's just coming up to the very front of my property. I'm probably still another the land all slopes here, and I'm probably still another 15 feet or more above that.
Well, good. You're going to probably need every single foot you got there. How are you preparing? I mean, outside of just being on higher ground than some people around you, what else have you done?
We boarded up. Every window door, they're all boarded up. Of course, we picked up everything, you know, out in the yard and whatever. Everything is stored away.
What about guests? It's a bed and breakfast. Did you send all your guests home?
Yes, they all left.
What's your plan for food? I guess let's show that picture again if we can. I think that's a picture of the bed and breakfast. If we had that up just a moment ago. There it is. It's absolutely beautiful. If the water comes up, that first floor porch is going to be flooded. No question about that. What's your plan right now as far as food and taking care of yourselves, you and your wife, for however many days you might be in this house?
Well, like I said, we have a great deal of food here in refrigerators, freezers, canned goods, whatever. I have a generator. Whenever the storm's over, I will crank that up. That'll keep our refrigeration going. We have gas cooking.
Rob Marciano, our meteorologist, is really essentially where you are as well. And some of the pictures that we've seen of him in the wind is pretty intense. What does it sound like? And where exactly are you hunkered down inside your house?
Right now I'm sitting in the bathroom. That's a central room. That's a central room. Mainly because right near here is the only phone in the house that is a landline phone. I mean, not a portable. So the power went out about 5 o'clock. So this is the only phone that works.
Well, good. I'm glad you still got a working phone. Thanks for talking with us. Roger Shanks and his wife Sandra, we should mention, is there with him as well as they decide to ride out the storm in their bed and breakfast in Biloxi, Mississippi. Thanks. Good luck to you. We'll check back in and make sure all turned out well and that you're safe in just a little bit. Our complete coverage of Hurricane Katrina will continue in just a moment. We're going to check in live with FEMA Director Mike Brown, find out how the agency is preparing for this one. You're watching an extended edition of American Morning. We're back right after the short break.
Keep watching CNN, your hurricane headquarters.
Welcome back to our special coverage of Hurricane Katrina. Now has made landfall officially by about 40 minutes now and is barreling its way up the Gulf Shore. You can see we're in Baton Rouge. This is the campus of Louisiana State University. And you can get a sense now, as a little bit of daylight here, that almost kind of horizontal rain that's coming across here, north to south. That northerly kind of wind is what we would expect as that counterclockwise flow of Katrina makes its way down through here. Let's talk about New Orleans for a second, because we have focused a lot of our attention on New Orleans because of great concern about the number of people there and the fact that it is so low-lying. We're told that upwards of 80% of the people who live in that city followed the mandatory evacuation orders, which is a pretty impressive number in a city that is used to hurricanes, is used to, quite frankly, a lot of near misses. But in this case, many people have listened, and many people, those who had no other options, no other place to go, didn't have the proper transportation, ended up in the Louisiana Superdome, where normally the New Orleans Saints play. Well, perhaps about 10,000 souls in there praying to some saints right now. Among them is Ed Reams. He is with our affiliate WDSU. He's here to tell us about the power going out and what that means for the people inside. Ed?
Hey, Miles. Yes, I'm sitting right in the end zone of the Saints field right here inside the Superdome. As you mentioned, we have seen a power outage here in the Superdome. The Superdome does run on emergency power, but on emergency power, we can't operate the air conditioning, which may make it very uncomfortable for the 10,000 plus people that are inside the Superdome right now, seeking shelter from Hurricane Katrina. We've seen a number of power hits throughout the morning. This one is lasting the longest. In fact, from reports through our reporters from our station throughout the downtown area, it seems like power is out to most of the central business district right now. We've also gotten reports from people who have called in to our station saying that they've seen roofs starting to peel off near the downtown area. We've also had reports of broken glass, a lot of flying debris in this area. That's why these folks are in the Superdome. They're seeking shelter from that very threat, the threat of flying debris, the threat of rising water possibly if we see that large storm surge. But if you look up, if you've ever been inside the Superdome, it's pretty immense. And if you look up, what we're seeing now is the rafters seem to be rattling up here, making a lot of people very anxious. The management of the Superdome here in New Orleans is pretty confident that the integrity of this building will be maintained despite the fact that Katrina is probably the largest hurricane that this area will face and has faced in quite some time. So right now, without power here in the Superdome, operating on emergency power right now, but it may take away some of the creature comforts that these folks have been enjoying for a number of hours. Number one, air conditioning, and that may be a major problem once Katrina moves on and the heat here in the Gulf Coast region returns. Miles?
Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, the roof of the Superdome, isn't it one of those sort of Teflon-type roofs?
That is the skin of the roof. The roof is actually pretty thick. If you remember, the roof was replaced. They put on a new type of Teflon skin, a kind of waterproof skin, but that doesn't mean that the roof itself is very thin. The Superdome was built over 25 years ago, and it is almost like a bunker. It's one of the safest places here in New Orleans. In fact, the only shelter that the city of New Orleans even opened. It was called a shelter of last resort. Of course, They wanted most of the population to get out of town, not wanting the population to rely on the Superdome as a shelter. But many of these folks are ones that either A, couldn't get out of town, or B, were on the fence and then saw the seriousness of Katrina and decided at the last minute that it was too late to evacuate it and needed to get to a safe place. So 10,000 plus people in here right now. Everybody's behaving themselves, but obviously very anxious with just the sounds of Katrina around us. If I may make one more observation to you, Miles, there's so much movement from this wind that we're in such a large building. All the undulation and pressure from the wind outside is almost changing the air pressure within the Superdome. You can almost feel it in your ears, that the wind outside pushing and moving the Superdome in so many different directions. It's almost you can almost feel it in the air. So it's causing a lot of concern for folks here who are seeking shelter. Miles?
Boy, that is a thought. Let me ask you one more question before you get away, Ed. The temperature here where I'm standing is 73 degrees. And that's typically what happens during hurricanes. It's not too bad. And then really the day after, it gets very, very hot, very humid. Right now where you are, I assume it's about the same. The concern might be in subsequent days if people get stuck there.
Right, exactly. And the National Guard, there's over 200 National Guard personnel here at the Superdome. They've been bringing in water, pallets of food. But what they're also going to be doing is is keeping people in the Superdome until it's actually safe to leave. During Hurricane George back in 1998, the last time the Superdome was used for evacuation, many people had to stay here 3.5 days. There were some pretty hot tempers because the sun was shining outside, but they were not allowed to go home. The National Guard says that will happen here. There's no sense in letting people out of the safest place in New Orleans if we're surrounded by floodwaters, if we're surrounded by down power lines, damaged homes, and especially if emergency services have not even had the opportunity after the storm passes to get in and to assess exactly just what kind of damage this city faced. So a lot of these people, they may think that they are prepared to be here for a while, but we just don't know how much damage Katrina could cause. So these folks may be here for quite some time. Miles?
Ed Reams is with our affiliate WDSU. He joins us on the line from inside the Superdome. Thank you very much. They're not allowing television cameras in there for privacy reasons, so it's good to hear from Ed and get a sense of what's going on inside. As 10,000 folks weather the storm inside the Superdome without the main power. They have emergency power, which means dim lights and no air conditioning. Well, if you know anything about New Orleans, no air conditioning is a big deal. Maybe not this moment, but in days to come if they remain stranded there. Our coverage of Hurricane Katrina now making landfall, having made landfall within the past 45 minutes, on its way to who knows what and how much damage, continues after a break. Stay with us.
Good morning. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to a special extended edition of American Morning where we are tracking Hurricane Katrina, who has made landfall about 45 minutes ago, made landfall as a Category 4 storm all over the Gulf Coast. People are waiting and watching. They're prepared to see what this storm will bring. Let's get right to Chad Myers. Chad's got the very latest on Katrina. Still a Category 4 storm, Chad. Does she look like she's getting stronger or weaker? You know, we always talked about that little eye wall. When it gets smaller, the storm will actually spin faster, and I've seen a little bit of shrinking of the eye wall itself, kind of like a top. It spins faster in the middle, or a skater that when she brings her arms in actually spins a little bit faster. I want you to see this line here. We can drop this breaking news bug real quick. This line is actually the direction that the storm was going overnight until about midnight, and then leave the line and look at it turn to the north. Boy, that would have been amazing if it didn't turn, but this is what the forecast models were saying that it was going to do. And the turn actually really helped out New Orleans. I'll get rid of that line.
Just a piece of tape, but you get the idea. That line really turns the storm toward the north and toward the northeast, an important distinction between a devastating storm for New Orleans and now winds at 85 miles, probably going to about 100 to 110. But New Orleans, you could have had those winds to 140. You are on the backside, which is always, we call it the easy side of the eye. It's not really an easy side of a Category 4 storm. Winds now at Lakefront Airport, 87 miles per hour. But the heaviest part of the storm is here east of New Orleans and going to slam into the Mississippi-Alabama coastline in about 4 hours.
Surely, Chad, for the folks who are in New Orleans, though, you're not suggesting that they're off the hook in any way, shape, or form. As you mentioned, a Category 4 storm. And this you know, they've said killer storm.
Yes.
This one, flooding is going to be a huge problem. Yes. Winds are going to be a huge problem.
But, Soledad, if this storm had traveled to the west by 40 or 50 miles and the water really did breach over the Mississippi levee, water in that could not have been pumped out fast enough. Those pumps would have been bogged down, and water could have been in New Orleans for 8 months before they could pump it out. And this is not that scenario.
Not quite so dire. All right,
yeah.
Chad, thanks. We'll check in with you again. Let's get right back to Miles. Hey, Miles.
Soledad, we're in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is where a lot of people evacuated to, about 80 miles west of New Orleans, and more importantly, about 50 feet higher than much of New Orleans. I'm at the campus of Louisiana State University, and a couple miles from me, right along the banks of the Mississippi River, that's where we find CNN's Anderson Cooper. Anderson?
Yeah, Miles, good morning. It is getting pretty bad here. I mean, the winds along the Mississippi really picking up. It's getting to the point where, you know, you cannot look into the rain. It's that stinging rain that really hits you pretty hard. I want to show you what the Mississippi looks like right now. We're seeing whitecaps on the Mississippi River, and the water has been slamming into this crane, which is on a barge, which is sort of parked here, but we have been seeing water just slamming into that, pouring over the edge of it, and that crane starting to move back and forth, which as these winds pick up is a big point of concern. What's going to happen to that barge? That is something we are watching very closely. We were down at the shore about 45 minutes ago, and judging from where the water is, it looks like the water has raised several feet already. It's past the point where we were standing before, so that water has already started to come up. We're probably a good 60 feet off the water level, so we're fine where we're standing here. But as you can see, it's these outer bands of the storm coming, really picking up with the wind, making it more and more uncomfortable to be here. We've seen a couple of people coming out, Miles, you know, sort of just wanted to see for themselves what it was like. They lasted a few minutes and sort of scurried off. It is getting very unpleasant out here. I'm not sure how it compares to where you are, just a few miles away, Miles, but I hope it's a little better where you are.
Yeah, I think it's probably a little better where I am, but even as you spoke, we're getting this huge sheet of rain, so I think you're about 2 miles away from me, and that's about as long as it took for that to get to me here. Thank you, Anderson Cooper, also in Baton Rouge. Of course, Baton Rouge is where the command center is for the state of Louisiana. Governor, senator, a lot of the political leaders and people who are in charge of picking up the pieces after what happens this morning are here. And, of course, among them, the federal officials, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The director of that agency is Mike Brown. He joins us now from that command center. Mr. Brown, good to have you with us. Just bring us up to date on what sort of reports you're getting in from the various authorities in these hard-hit areas.
Well, I've talked to the State Emergency Operations Center, and of course they're up and running full blast. But I've also got some people embedded in the in the New Orleans Emergency Operations Center. They've lost power, as you've reported. They've lost power in the Superdome, and so our medical teams are there to help those people as they deal with that situation. I've had reports of obviously windows beginning to break, the roofs and other things beginning to fly. So the storm's beginning to have that impact that we anticipated it to have. As you heard from your meteorological reports, as it continues to shift to a little bit more to the east, of course, my concern has always been Biloxi and Mississippi as the storm begins to make that northeastward turn up there. So we've got people pre-positioned all the way from Atlanta over to Fort Worth to move into all of those areas as the storm continues to make landfall.
You know, it's interesting, Mr. Brown, I'm not sure people fully appreciate, when you say pre-positioning, the logistical challenge that is involved in all of this. I was driving into New York City on Saturday through Allentown, and I saw probably 30 utility trucks headed out, Con Edison, headed down, presumably in this direction to help out. give us a sense of how strategically placed assets are, and if you have enough people in place to handle something as extensive as this could be.
Well, we've got enough people and commodities in place right now for a 3 to 5 day surge capacity. But what I've ordered my folks to do is to jam that supply line up as far back as Fort Worth and as far back as Atlanta. So as those supplies begin to run out, we can continue to feed those in here as long as it takes. I was out last night kind of surveying Baton Rouge and just kind of getting my bearings. And I, too, also saw the utility trucks already beginning to line up. Because that's one of the most, I mean, in addition to the life-saving efforts that we do, the medical efforts that we do, it's getting that power back up that's just as critical, too. The power runs the convenience stores for the gas stations. So as people begin to move back into their homes and their neighborhoods, they've got to have gas to get back in there. And I want to remind folks, too, that as this storm, even though it's continuing to weaken a little bit, there's still going to be power outages, there's still going to be tornadoes, there's still going to be high winds and damage. It's still going to be very dangerous to move back into those neighborhoods. So please don't do that until the authorities give the okay to move back in.
Mike Brown is the director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. He joins me from about 5 miles from where I stand in the command center in Baton Rouge. Thanks very much. We'll check back in with you later. Thanks for that update on where things stand right now. And I should tell you, Soledad, as I toss it off to you, it's getting significantly worse here. Clearly, Katrina is on her way. Not that we didn't know that already, but we're seeing the proof of it right now. Soledad?
Yeah, we can certainly see the conditions deteriorate. Miles, thanks. Let's get right to Kathleen Blanco. She is the governor of Louisiana. She joins us from the Baton Rouge Hurricane Command Center. Nice to see you, ma'am. Thanks for talking with us this morning. I guess there's good news, which is from the latest models. It looks as if the storm is starting to curve a little bit to the east, which means New Orleans is not directly on the path. What have they been telling you in your briefings about what you can expect damage-wise?
Well, we know that we'll still suffer considerable damage. There'll be a tremendous amount of property damage. There'll be some light flooding in some areas. Perhaps we won't be impacted with that storm surge that was so dreaded and caused us to necessarily do a mandatory evacuation. We don't know yet. We still have a long way to go throughout this day. We are watching. We are worried, of course. We hope that everyone is safe, and Louisiana citizens have moved out. I'm very proud of the way that we were able to get an evacuation done so quickly.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, if I may. I mean, 80% by some counts, 80% of the people who are used to these kinds of storms, maybe not of this magnitude, packed up their stuff and heeded the evacuation orders. You must be very happy with that number.
Yes, I am very proud of our Louisiana citizens. I think they're storm smart, as I like to say it. But sometimes, you know, we see near misses and we have calls for evacuation. It's frustrating to get up on the highways with so many people. But in the end, our people are worried about themselves and their families, and that's who we want them to worry about. We want them to be safe.
Let's talk about some of the preparations that you have in place right now. I know the National Guard is set. What will they be doing if they need to?
Well, just as soon as the brunt of the storm moves more inland, the National Guard will do damage assessments. We'll have air missions coming in behind the storm, and we'll be doing search and rescue if necessary. We hope that there aren't too many people out there who will be in need of rescue, but it often happens. Yeah. We will be working with FEMA. We appreciate the President's call to us, giving us all the resources with Mike Brown and all of his team of people. It's critical for us at this time that we have that knowledge and that security that our people will be taken care of. It's going to take a while to get all the damage repaired, but it's easier to repair damage than it is to restore lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Understatement of the day, certainly. Governor Kathleen Blanco, thank you for your time this morning. I know you're really busy. We appreciate it. We want to check in with Gary Tuckman. He is roving the Mississippi coast. He's in Hurricane 1. It's CNN's official vehicle for hurricane coverage. Gary, give us a sense of exactly where you are right now.
Soledad, we're in Gulfport, Mississippi, and this is where the eastern eyewall is expected to land. We're right near the beach right now, near US 90. This is our Hurricane 1 unit. It allows us to transmit live pictures during a hurricane. On top of this vehicle is a gyro that's always moving, and that's why we can always have the live signal. It's the same technology we used during the beginning of the war as the military vehicles were crossing the desert. But we want to show you some of the damage here that we're seeing in downtown Gulfport. Very serious damage already. I'm going to open the door for a second and get out and show you this is downtown, and that's a boat that is washed up on the street. This is not the strongest part of the hurricane yet, and you can see how the winds are coming in. This road is completely flooded. This road is usually very crowded this time of day, but this is the street where this boat is right now. This is not the water. The beach is about 100 yards in that direction. So that gives you an idea. It's a very treacherous, and it's only going to get worse. Back to you, Soledad.
All right, Gary Tuckman for us, really out there, and you can see, even though we can't get a really good shot of what's behind him, with standing on the street with a boat behind him, and as he points out, it is really only the very beginning of this storm. It's going to get much, much worse. We'll check in with Gary and Hurricane One as we continue through the morning. Coming up next, the very latest on the path of Hurricane Katrina. We'll take you live to the National Hurricane Center. That's in Miami. And then lots of travelers are going to have to ride out the storm in hotels. We're going to talk to a woman who's stranded in New Orleans, find out what her story is. That's ahead on American Morning. Stay with us.
Keep watching CNN, your hurricane headquarters.
Welcome back, everybody, to our special coverage, American Morning, coming to you extended version this morning. And we are certainly your hurricane headquarters as we track the path of Hurricane Katrina this morning. Miles O'Brien's in Baton Rouge, and he has his, there you go. What's the wind speed, Miles?
Well, it's, I'm trying to get this thing to work, quite frankly, Soledad. I'm kind of blocked here by a building, so I need to go out here. I'm going to go out here a little more.
Okay.
Try to give you a sense of it. It's really blowing out here, though, as you can see. Look, Jack, can you get a shot of that rain? It's almost horizontal there. Of course, as you can see, there are people just driving through here. There's no evacuations, mandatory or otherwise, here in Baton Rouge, and there are 30,000 students here, Soledad, who are, well, dare we say, perhaps having a hurricane party or two, I suppose, but not, of course, a laughing matter. Right now, we're still talking only about 20 mile-an-hour gusts. Right now, I just get about 4 miles an hour there. So the wind is still just starting to pick up here. Got to remember where we are, though. We're talking about 80 miles to the west of that eye. We did that on purpose so that we would have a better chance of being able to broadcast and give you a sense of it without being shut down. So far, that plan seems to be working. Dare I hex it by saying that, of course, but so far this has worked out pretty well. 40 feet above sea level, that doesn't sound like a lot, but that is, 50 feet above many parts of New Orleans. So in many respects, this is a good place to be, Soledad.
Yeah, we certainly have seen it, and the light's a lot better than when we started this morning, Miles, but the conditions really deteriorating, which I guess obviously the storm's getting closer and closer. It made landfall, but as you talked about, we're talking about that marshy area, which is land, but then it's water and land, and then back over water again. How bad do they think it's going to be where you are?
Well, it's hard to say. It's a huge storm. I mean, there was a point in time yesterday where one edge of the storm had sort of touched the first parts of the Gulf, and the bottom end was still in Cuba. So that's a huge, huge storm, much bigger than Hurricane Andrew. Andrew was kind of a tightly packed, ferocious storm. In this case, you've got the potential for hurricane force winds upwards of 100 miles from the eye, and that would put us right where we are right now, Soledad. So we're watching it. It could get pretty hairy here, not as bad as being, say, where Rob Marciano is right now.
Well, we're watching it from all fronts. Miles, thanks. We'll check in with you again. And, of course, they're keeping a close eye on Katrina at the National Hurricane Center. Let's get right to Ed Rappaport. He is there this morning. He's the deputy director. Hey, Ed, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Let me ask you a question about this storm surge. Chad was saying, as the storm now turns to the east, you breathe a sigh of relief because it looks like the storm surge won't be as great. Does that mean the potential for the levees to overflow, which had all these pretty dire potential flooding and the toxic problems that could come out of that, does that mean that those have all been avoided now, that they're in the clear?
Well, I need to clarify, while the track has turned more to the right, it's still moving, the hurricane's still moving almost due north. And what that means is that we still have a great deal of risk from about the New Orleans area eastward There are two different threats here. On the right side will be the highest storm surge, perhaps 20 feet still. That'll be over on the Mississippi Gulf Coast to Alabama, and not quite so high in the Florida Panhandle. On the west side, where there's a north wind, will be driving the water from Lake Pontchartrain southward towards New Orleans. The only good news is they're going to be on the weaker side of the storm, and the hurricane's a little weaker now. It's not Category 5 anymore. But the storm surge could be 10 to 15 feet still on this west side, which is near the tops of the levees in the New Orleans area.
Yeah, near, but I guess that's all the difference in the world, because at some point yesterday and earlier this morning we were talking about potentially 28-foot storm surges, which of course would go over those levees by 11 feet or so. They're 17 feet high, if I'm not mistaken. So 15 feet, as bad as that would be, certainly is a huge improvement.
Well, we're still expecting surges of at least 20 feet on the right side. The difference is that the center appears to be moving just to the east of New Orleans. And so the surge is going to come in to the east of New Orleans, the highest surge, but there will be significant surge on the west side, and you're right. The question is now, will it make it to the tops of the levee, and we'll have to wait another hour or two to see.
And you basically are saying it's now become Mississippi's problem to a large degree, and everything that people were concerned about in New Orleans to some degree, it now becomes an issue in Mississippi. I want to ask you and Chad also, if we can bring Chad Myers in as well. We haven't talked a lot, Chad, about the damage as it moves inland because, of course, we're focused on the Gulf Coast at this point. Right. What are we looking at for people who are not right on the coast, but a little bit of the ways in? When it hits land, then it weakens, so it's very good news.
It weakens a little bit, Soledad, but not enough. This entire storm is going to move 150 miles inland, still with hurricane force winds, mainly on the east side, as Ed was talking about, but there will be power outages all the way up into Tennessee, possibly if the storm continues to turn right, possibly all the way to Atlanta. Ed, I have a question for you, though, because I've been unable to find any working water level stations in Lake Pontchartrain. As you were saying, I'm very concerned with this water situation pouring in with these east and these southeast winds into Lake Pontchartrain, and then the winds from the north on the other side of the eye pushing it over the levee, actually flooding New Orleans from the backside. Do you have any water levels at all? They all seem to be broken to me.
Yeah, we don't have any real-time observations at the moment. We'll check on that for you, but at this stage I don't have any water heights. We are concerned for just those reasons you mentioned, the water coming in from the east and then from the north, possibly going over the levees towards New Orleans. It's going to be very close.
And you're going to have waves on top of that, Soledad. You know, we talk about a storm surge of 20 feet, but there may be a 20-foot wave on top of that storm surge, too. So you add 20 and 20, and you get some dangerous levels.
Wow, that sounds really, really bad. All right, let me ask you a quick question before I let you go. What point do we see the storm hitting where some of our reporters are? In New Orleans, in Biloxi, where we really see the eye wall hitting? Ed, can you answer?
Yes, I'll answer that, sure. The next 2 or 3 hours, the weather will be going down very quick, deteriorating very quickly in the New Orleans area. They're going to be right on the edge of the northwestern eye wall, it would appear. So the worst of the conditions will be before 11 a.m. or so their time. And then the weather is going to be at its worst around noon local time as we get up towards the Mississippi Gulf Coast.
All right, Ed Rappaport. Ed, thanks as always. He's the Deputy Director of the National Hurricane Center. We'll check in with you again. Let's get back to Miles O'Brien. He's in Baton Rouge for us this morning. Hey, Miles, good morning again.
Hey, Soledad. Yeah, I'm just going around checking the wind speeds out here. It's picking up quite significantly. I was just, as a matter of fact, this guy right here, just came in and said he almost got clocked by a mobile sign with his car. Hey, tell me quickly, what happened? Where were you driving when this happened?
Down Perkins Avenue.
And what happened?
The wind is blowing signs off the gas station, so they're out on the street. So the police are, putting their police cars there and barricading the sections where the signs are blowing down.
Wow, and I mean, right here we're a bit protected. We got the stadium here. We've got kind of some protection around us. I guess there's a little more wind than we think.
Yeah, on avenues where there is no tree line, the wind is gusting and just blowing straight down the avenue. So any signs that aren't secured, like on gas stations, are coming off and flying around.
Yeah, and are people out in the street? Are there quite a few cars out there?
There's hardly any. There's just a bunch of police cars, pretty much it, and 1 or 2 scattered vehicles here and there.
All right, hopefully not too scattered. All right, thank you very much. Let's get to New Orleans. Jean Meserve on the line with us now. She's not too far from the Superdome, kind of near the quarter, in that whole part of the world where there's a lot of concern about flood surge, topping over levees. Not quite there yet, Jean, are we?
No, we aren't. I'm monitoring the water level in the street. It has not come up significantly. It looks to me with a good pair of boots you could still get through this water. And some places that are on the uphill rise still actually have no puddling on them whatsoever. If you hear some rattling in the background, I'm holding what used to be a Venetian blind. It now is just a shambles in my hand. It's an indication of what's flying off of these buildings. Windows are beginning to pop, things like this, draperies being held in the wind. Also, big pieces of roofing. We've even seen a chunk of concrete coming off the building here. It's really sort of spectral because the laws of gravity are totally denied here. The wind keeping things aloft for protracted periods of time, and they just sort of float like ghosts above the landscape here. And occasionally you'll even see a bird out here struggling, trying to make headway and obviously failing completely. But the flooding situation at this point in this location does not appear too serious, but no power at all, just some emergency lighting up here and there. Miles, back to you.
You know, Gene, you were breaking up a little bit. Did you say that concrete was flying off of buildings?
We did see one big hunk of concrete that appeared to come off a building near us, but we have not seen anything but that one incident. Most of it is roofing, pieces of corrugated steel, and things of that ilk being picked up by the wind. Remarkably, from at least my current vantage point, it looks like most of the street signs are intact. I haven't seen any light poles go down. I haven't seen any trees go down. But it's pretty intense here. The visibility is very low. There is a tower. I don't know how long or far away from us it is, but we could see it earlier. Now it's totally obliterated. It almost looks like you're in a snowstorm. Everything around you is white, white, white from heavy, heavy sheet of rain that's coming down all over the city of New Orleans and beyond. Miles?
All right, and hopefully, aside from yourself, you're not seeing anybody on those streets, right?
No, absolutely not. No people, no traffic. I took a glance over at the Superdome to see if I saw any kinds of activity there. Emergency vehicles parked around it as they have been, but no movement on the streets at all.
Gene Missouri, please stay safe there in New Orleans as you bear witness to Katrina's arrival here. We're bearing witness here in Baton Rouge as well. We got reporters all along the Gulf Coast giving you the latest on Hurricane Katrina. CNN is your hurricane headquarters. Stay with us for more American Morning.
Keep watching CNN, your hurricane headquarters.
Welcome back, everybody. It's exactly 1:30 on This American Morning. We're CNN, your hurricane headquarters, and we are certainly following the breaking news as the center of Hurricane Katrina moves along the eastern edge of Louisiana right to Mississippi. It's a Category 4 storm right now, wind speeds of 145 miles an hour, extremely powerful. The storm not only capable of knocking down large trees and ripping off the roofs of buildings, it can even knock down homes. We've got reporters in Mobile, Alabama, in Biloxi, Mississippi, in New Orleans, Louisiana, and all over the place. Chad Myers, as well, is watching what's happening in Atlanta at the CNN Center. Chad, good morning to you. As we mentioned, Category 4 storm, as much as it's a downgrade from the earlier Category 5, it's still a deadly storm.
Still very strong, 140 to 145 on the eastern eye wall. And a couple of new updates here from Pascagoula Civil Defense, a wind gust to 113 miles per hour. And now from the Weather Service out of New Orleans for St. Tammany Parish and the counties of Hancock and Harrison, tornado warnings in effect for you. Not because there's a tornado on the ground, but because your wind speeds now equal that of an F1 or an F2 tornado. The entire area under tornado warnings right through here because of that potential for that wind to continue to grow. Here's the land, here's the rain. Zoom in a couple of spots for you here. The eye went right over southeast Louisiana. Now the eye wall is not actually the western eye wall, not that far from eastern suburban New Orleans. That eye wall continues to travel to the north, and as it does, every time we get closer, Biloxi, Gulfport, all the way over even to Bay St. Louis, that wind is going to get stronger with every one of these lines as it moves on by. There you see the land up here, a couple of offshore islands. And there's your radar again coming up here. You would think that maybe we'll lose a little of intensity here because, well, it's over land. there's not much land in southeast Louisiana. There's just an awful lot of swampland there, and that does not slow down a hurricane. You almost need like a mountain range to slow it down, or at least some big area of dry land, and it's not obviously that. There's Pascagoula, and that little line right there that just pushed on by, that was your 113-mile-per-hour wind gust. There's Pascagoula again, moving through Mobile as well today. The storm itself made a right-hand turn in the overnight hours. It was destined to go right between New Orleans and Baton Rouge and then turn, and it turned in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. As it did that, it put New Orleans on the easy side of the eye. Now, there isn't really such a thing in Cat 4, but at least it's easier than the eastern side of the eye. Here's Rob Marciano's location here, the Comfort Inn in Biloxi, about 14 to 15 miles inland. We have our reporters in good shape. Do not worry about them. We're not putting them in harm's way. But you can see the flooding there from the rainfall already, and there's an awful lot more rainfall to come. Rob is still 60 miles from the center of the eye. There's a lot more of this to come. Back to you guys.
Wow, you can certainly see the flooding, and you could also see the rain, which has been alternately described by many of our reporters this morning as almost horizontal as the wind blows it right through. A pretty good picture of that, again, live picture from Biloxi, Mississippi. Rob Marciano's there. We're going to check in with him in just a little bit. First, though, let's get right back to Miles O'Brien. He's in Baton Rouge. Hey, Miles, good morning again.
Thanks, Soledad. Baton Rouge, of course, the capital of Louisiana, the second largest city in this state, and at least in this instance, is sitting relatively pretty. 40 feet above sea level is where I am right now. That's a significant improvement over New Orleans, which, of course, is below sea level. And as Chad just put it, on the easy side of the storm. Once again, that's a relative term here. We are talking about a storm that is so big, hurricane-force winds could extend 100 miles from the radius of that eye as it comes ashore. So this is going to be right on the cusp of hurricane-force winds here. And, of course, the Mississippi River comes through town, so there's a possibility of flooding. Somebody who's watching that very closely is the mayor of Baton Rouge, Melvin Kip Holden, joining us now. Thank you for standing in the rain for us, Mr. Mayor. We appreciate that. Give us an update. What are you hearing from the authorities in Baton Rouge? What are you hearing from people? Are you weathering the storm well so far?
Yeah, so far so good. We have about 3,000 people who have evacuated. A lot of those people have come from New Orleans. But right now we're mainly concerned about down power lines and trees and possible flooding later on today.
You mentioned the down power lines of the trees. We've been just watching these trees here, trying to almost take a pool as to which branch is going to come down. That's going to be a significant problem in the outlying areas. We talk about the flooding and topping the levees in New Orleans, but the loss of power over time can be a real big problem.
Depending on the magnitude, we have estimates of anywhere from 1 week to 3 weeks based on power outages. So right now, the energy companies right now have been waiting. They are not moving anybody out right now. They're going to wait until the storm subsides. Then they'll make an assessment. That assessment also will be made in conjunction with the governor's office, so we can get a full idea of what we need to do in order to alleviate some of the problems people will be confronted with.
You know, Baton Rouge, as I said, kind of sitting pretty, higher elevation. You're not right smack dab on the coast. Nevertheless, you've encountered some problems with hurricanes in the past.
We have, and we've had some very serious storms. I can go back to my childhood, and frankly, in my house, we did not evacuate, and a lot of people did this time, but we stayed there, and windows were blowing out, and the ceiling tile really fell to the floor. But thankfully, we had a little cinder block business, and we went out in that business and stayed the night. But really, the people here have heeded the warnings, and we are in much better condition now because of technology than what we used to be in terms of how do you predict a storm.
Boy, that must have been quite a night going through that years ago. That's the kind of thing people remember all their life and take that into account as they make decisions.
Yes, you do, because when you look outside and you see power lines virtually on fire, when you see the windows just blowing out and all of those things, obviously it's very frightening. But again, here we've been able to avoid a lot. There's great concern still about New Orleans, and whatever happens here, we're also going to be very much working with the mayor of New Orleans to try to provide what resources they may need there as well.
You know, in the news this morning, there seems to be a glimmer of hope, a little wobble, which might send it away from a direct hit on New Orleans. And nevertheless, though, the potential there, truly catastrophic is an overused term, but it does apply in this case. Is this region ready to handle something like this?
We're not sure because we now are dealing with what I call the X factor hurricane because nothing has been of this magnitude. So what we're trying to do is make an assessment, and after this passes through, then we'll go and see, well, what other adjustments can we make? Are there areas whereby we may be able to tighten up some things to really get even more prepared? But let me tell you one thing. The people that have handled emergency preparedness throughout the state are second to none. They've been in these situations before, and it is getting better.
All right, with that, Mayor Kip Holden, thank you very much. Appreciate you being with us, getting a little wet with us, and good luck to you and your city as you endure Katrina. The X Factor storm, he calls it, Rob Marciano. I think you're getting a good dose of X right now there in Biloxi, Mississippi. Rob?
Hi, Miles. It's really been getting bad the last 20 minutes to 30 minutes. The squalls now are becoming more frequent. The downtime is virtually nothing. And we got now sustained winds over 50 miles an hour with gusts to hurricane strength. Take a look behind me, and you get a good idea just how much those trees are getting pounded and blown around by these winds. Tree limbs have been coming down. Transformers have been exploding around this area. And it's getting to a point where hurricane-force sustained winds are going to become more likely. We have 2 cameras set up for you. We do expect probably to have to get out of the storm at some point entirely. Let's go to the second camera. It's on the 3rd floor of this building, which faces the south and east. You can see the sign for the hotel there, and there are pieces of that sign already starting to loosen up and threaten to fly off. And when that happens, they're going to become missiles. So we're protecting ourselves from that happening. At the same time, trying to bring you the pictures. Shelters, Miles, as of a couple of hours ago, they moved a couple of the shelters because of the threat for flooding along the Wolf River. South of I-10, widespread power outages now, as I suspect the winds down there are even stronger than they are right here. We are about 6 miles north of the coastline. I-10 runs that way from west to east, and the winds right now are blowing from east to west, so that has remained constant. When we start to get a bit of a shift either from the northeast or the southeast, that will kind of help us determine where the actual location of the storm is. Folks are obviously nervous here. Hotels north of I-10 are packed with people who have evacuated from south of I-10. They've brought their pets, and that's actually, if there's one thing that's kind of comforting from this storm, is that the pets that are around the hotel kind of bring a bit of a sense of calm. But right now it's anything but that, Miles. Winds continue to pick up, and we're getting close to hurricane force sustained right now. Right now sustained at about 50 miles an hour. And one other thing I want to show you. Like this light pole right here is steel. See how it's flailing around up there? When we were in Hurricane Ivan last year, a Category 3 storm that came on shore just east of Mobile, light poles like this one, steel poles that were bolted down into the concrete, were literally snapped off their foundations. So it's not just flimsy signs and aluminum overhangs from gas stations that are going to start to unravel here, but likely steel poles and steel structures like this one here. So things are getting worse, Miles. I don't know how other else to describe it here in Biloxi, or just at least 6 miles north of the coastline, away from the storm surge, but certainly not away from the winds. Is Chad there? Is Chad anywhere close by? I heard him say something about what the observations were like in other parts of Mississippi, and I'm curious if we've had reports of wind gusts in other areas. You have any notable wind gusts that you've heard of, Miles,
Rob?
out of either Mississippi or? Yeah.
Rob, this is Chad. Pascagoula, the emergency management officials there, 113 miles per hour wind gust as this one arm of the feeder band went by. That same arm moved by you about 45 minutes ago. Your wind gust could have easily been 100 miles per hour right where you're standing.
I believe it. Holy smokes, over 100, huh? I believe it. It's not going to get any better.
No, there are more bands headed your way as well, and as each band gets closer and closer, and as you get closer and closer to the eye, your winds are going to be higher in sustained winds and obviously higher in gusts as well every time a feeder band goes by. So be careful out there.
Will do.
Wow, those numbers are amazing when you hear those 110-mile-an-hour winds. I'm sitting here holding my little anemometer up here thinking whether it would read anything at 110 miles an hour. So far, the situation here, Baton Rouge, nowhere near that. As we say, we're sort of on the easy side of the storm. We're well above sea level, and there's no mandatory evacuations here. But we're still, as you can see, we're seeing the full effects of Katrina, and the worst is yet to come. More of our special coverage after just a moment.
Keep watching CNN, your hurricane headquarters. Minute coverage of Hurricane Katrina. Stay with CNN.
This is the picture of Katrina. Katrina making her presence be known here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We're about 80 miles northwest of New Orleans. And as we're told, Katrina's eye wall is going to go a little bit to the east of New Orleans. That might be good news for the Crescent City. In the meantime, a lot of people who evacuated from New Orleans, myself included yesterday, have come here because it's high ground and on the so-called easier side of the storm, the left side of the eye wall. Having said all of that, we just talked to the mayor. They're very concerned about trees being down, the power outages, which of course are inevitable, and of course the swollen banks of the Mississippi River.